Welcome to the very first meeting of the new Health, Mental Health, and Education Committee in City Hall, room 1010. Not only is it the first meeting of our committee, but it's the first ever meeting that I'm chairing. So, welcome, thank you. And I'd love to welcome my colleagues, my Vice Chair, Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell, Councilmember Mitch Englander, Councilmember Joe Buscaino, and Councilmember Felipe Fuentes. Thank you very much for coming. I am extremely grateful that you have agreed to serve on the committee charged with finding new, creative, and effective ways of addressing issues that have been neglected for far too long. Oh, and I forgot to introduce the name of our committee. Health, Mental Health, and Education Committee is the formal name, but I'd like to call ourselves Health, Mental Health, Disabilities, and Aging. Aging and disabilities. So it appears we have a quorum. Call the meeting to order. And before I take up the agenda, I'd like to make a few brief remarks. This is a great opportunity to be better advocates for better quality of life that includes health and mental health for our families and neighborhoods we represent. So today I will be formally asking my colleagues to bring your thoughts on the agenda and policies that this committee should tackle. Any and all directions you can provide with us will be much appreciated. With that said, I'd like to remind those of you in the public of if you would like to speak on any other items for public comments, please fill out the comment cards, which you can pick up from the city clerk. And in order to accommodate, is the Department of Public Health here? From the county? Not yet, right. So to accommodate the Department of Public Health, I'd like to begin with agenda item number 2. Can the CLA, Mr. Randall, could you read item number 2, please?
Item number 2 is City Attorney Report and Ordinance relative to amending and repealing several sections of the Los Angeles Municipal Code to strengthen penalties against tobacco retailers who illegally sell tobacco to minors and to support enforcement of the city's no smoking laws.
And I believe the City Attorney's office is here?
Good morning, Councilmember Rayo. Nice to meet you. My name is Selena Porras, and I'm the Deputy City Attorney that advises our tobacco program. Good morning, Council members. And Nora Manzanilla, our Program Director for the tobacco program, is also available to answer any questions. Good morning.
Oh, do you have a presentation, or?
No, we're just available should any council members have questions on the proposed ordinance. This ordinance was a result of recommendations that our tobacco program and the city attorney made to Arts Parks Health, and I believe has now been transferred over here. The original motion asked for recommendations to strengthen our enforcement efforts against retailers that sell tobacco to children. So we provided some recommendations to Arts, Parks, and Health. There were 5 recommendations. During that hearing, our 5th recommendation...
Before you do the recommendations, Can you just give us a brief overview of the tobacco enforcement policies that you currently operate?
Sure. Currently, the tobacco enforcement program is responsible for the tobacco retailer's permit program. So all retailers in the city must have a tobacco retailer's permit to sell tobacco. The tobacco program monitors those retailers, makes sure that everyone is in compliance with that permit, and also issues penalties against any retailers that sell to children. So that is the main thing that the tobacco program does. If you had any specific questions on the program, Nora can answer those as well.
I just wanted the background. And so your recommendations, your 5 recommendations you were saying?
The 5 recommendations were to strengthen the administrative penalties of our permit system. Currently, if someone sells tobacco to a minor for the first time, they are issued a letter of reprimand. Upon a second violation, the penalty is a 30-day tobacco permit suspension, followed by a 90-day and then a 12-month. When we looked at some of the other jurisdictions, not only in other cities in our county, but also statewide, we saw that the city's penalty scheme was a lot more lenient than anywhere else in the state. So we recommended completely eliminating that letter of reprimand, which was essentially a warning letter, and instead going immediately to a suspension. So our first recommendation was remove the letter of reprimand, issue a 30-day suspension immediately, and then also include a revocation provision. Currently, if you violate 4 times, you get your permit revoked for a year. We want to completely revoke permits for retailers that sell tobacco 4 times within a 5-year period. Once that permit is revoked, the retailer would have the opportunity to reapply for it after 3 years has lapsed, and they take a tobacco responsible retailer education program that the city attorney's office would provide. Our next recommendation was to require all tobacco retailers that are serving a suspension to visibly post a notice of suspension at their store. This would be similar to the posting that ABC locations are required to post when they're under a suspension. And it should also be noted that the state, in addition to the city permit that retailers have to obtain, there's also a state cigarette license that a tobacco retailer has to obtain. When the state suspends a retailer's license, the state requires a notice of suspension to be posted. So we would be consistent with what the state is doing with their tobacco license. Our next recommendation would be to require that any suspended retailer remove all tobacco advertising from their store during the periods of suspension. We think that that can promote illegal sales or possibly facilitate them. And we really feel that you shouldn't advertise a product that you actually cannot legally sell. So that was the basis for that recommendation. And again, these, the recommendations that I've just stated were taken from a really wide net of research that we did of other jurisdictions in the state, nationwide, and what a lot of the legal think tanks, a lot of the tobacco advocacy groups are places that research the best practices for keeping tobacco away from kids have identified as best practices and best ways to promote a strong tobacco retail license. Our next recommendation was to address some of the exemptions in our smoke-free outdoor dining ordinance. As currently written, there is an exemption for bars, nightclubs, private events. So we just wanted to fine-tune those. At the time we made the recommendation, it was kind of one umbrella recommendation to address all 3 of what I just stated, bars, nightclubs, and private events. Council Member O'Farrell recommended that we bifurcate that and move forward with just the cleaning up of the bar definition, which we have, and made it a little more user-friendly, so it's very clear what type of business qualifies. The reason we needed to do that is that there were some businesses, such as restaurants, that were claiming to be a bar simply by having an ABC license. So we wanted to make clear that we didn't intend to exempt all businesses that sold alcohol. We truly just meant adult bars, and that's why we've made it specific to what type of ABC license that they have. As for the private event exemption, Council, the committee asked us to report back on that. We have not yet completed that research. We were asked for things such as statistics, how many businesses might be impacted, and we've found that there really isn't a database that we can look to get those types of numbers. The problems with the private event exemption that we found were more anecdotal in nature. It was more law enforcement calling us, asking us, how do we determine if something is a private event, or businesses asking us, how do I show the city attorney's office that I am a private event? And that's when we found that there isn't a private event definition or specific criteria. So again, we want to work on that some more. We didn't want to hold up this ordinance or the proposed amendments and delay them, so we wanted to move forward with this part, but we will be reporting back shortly with additional findings as to that private event exemption.
Just a couple of quick questions. So if the ordinance is adopted, when will it go into effect?
I will defer to Noreen Vincent, our Assistant City Attorney, but I think I'm correct to say that after the full council adopts our proposed definitions or proposed amendments, it would be 30 days, is that correct?
Plus the notice period, so typically 45 days.
Okay.
And you talked about the, you haven't finished the study for the private events. When does the city attorney expect to finish that report up?
I think probably within the next 30 days we can, if not have a report on that, at least maybe meet with the committee informally and kind of discuss where we're going with it and get a little more guidance. I guess the flavor we got was that there might be more of a desire to keep that exemption as opposed to our recommendation of eliminating it. So if we are going to keep it, I think we have to look at how to fine-tune it and how to better define that private event exemption. So we want to work with the council member's office a little bit more on that before we propose any specific drafting.
Okay. So we could go on with this ordinance, and when this, when the private events ordinance comes in, recommendation comes in, we could revise it later?
Correct.
And does the city attorney have sufficient staff and funding to implement the enforcement of this program?
Yes. For all of the amendments that we've drafted, or all of the proposed amendments that we've drafted, those can all be accomplished within our current budget.
Okay. Colleagues?
Yes. Thank you. First of all, Mr. Root, congratulations. I'm just really pleased to be your vice chair on this committee, and I want to thank Ms. Porras and Ms. Manzanilla and the City Attorney's Office for so thoroughly exploring every option in creating this ordinance and working with my office over the past several months. When this came before committee, we did make suggestions for refining. The whole objective here is to give protections to children and our youth, and do all we can to discourage a lifetime habit of nicotine addiction. And so I think we have a real balanced, reasonable approach, and that notwithstanding the possible exemptions for special events, et cetera, what we discovered through this process, which before this process began, is that Los Angeles is extremely overly lenient when it comes to enforcement of tobacco laws, much more so than practically any other place in the state of California. And here are some very alarming statistics. There are 4,768 tobacco retailers within the city, and over 1,000 of those, 24%, are often out of compliance and sell to minors. Now, the California rate of unlawful sales to minors is 7.6%. So in LA, it's 24%. In the state of California, 7.6%. That is alarming, unacceptable, and shame on us if we don't enact laws to give a greater protection to youth. Often youth at the urban core in the inner city who have access to tobacco products, which just compounds the issue. So after it came before my committee and we made some recommendations, it then came to council and unanimously supported crafting this ordinance, and it is before us today. So I, for one, look very forward to giving additional protections that I think are very reasonable and are really in keeping with most municipalities across the state. And it really, I think, helps put Los Angeles out there as more of a leader in discouraging tobacco use, which is exactly where we should be. So I want to thank again the City Attorney's Office for all the work that you've done on this, and I look forward to making this an improved ordinance for the whole city.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I had a question.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Strengthening these penalties is something the city ought to do, and it's long overdue. However, I'm struggling with the fact that do we have an enforcement arm willing to enforce these laws now that we're strengthening them, and what's the plan moving forward? We can strengthen all the laws we want here in the city of Los Angeles. However, we need that enforcement arm to ensure that these businesses are abiding by these stiffer penalties?
Well, absolutely. I'll let Nora speak a little bit as to the specifics of the contractual service agreement that we have with the state. But the penalties against retailers that sell to children, the way that we monitor those are based on a specific contract that the tobacco program has. So we're not looking for new enforcement, or we're not asking an enforcement agency to take this on. They actually have to do it by contract, and Nora can give you the specifics.
So currently, and actually since 2001, the City of Los Angeles has been contracting with the California Department of Public Health Food and Drug Branch. So through this contractual services agreement, they conduct between 700 to 900 compliance checks per year. So what happens is each compliance check, we have 2 Department of Public Health investigators that go out with a 15 or 16-year-old minor decoy. Everybody is mic'd and has a camera that obviously the public can't see, and they go into the store, and just so you know, I mean, safety is the biggest factor with this, and, you know, knock on wood, we've never had any problems. But they conduct this pursuant...
It's like similar to the shoulder tap detail.
Yes.
With the ABC violations, right?
Correct.
Similar to that, but you are using, and you have to use, because this is pursuant to the California Business and Professions Code, Stop Tobacco Access to Kids Enforcement Act. You have to use a 15 or 16-year-old decoy that has a valid California identification. So they go into the store, and the minor asks, you know, can I buy a pack of Marlboro Reds, or, you know, the cigarillos. So we have different things that they ask for. So when that takes place and a violation takes place, the Department of Public Health has within a 24-hour period to notify the business owner of the sale of tobacco products to minor. So they go back into the store, and obviously most of the time, because it's on video, they redact obviously the face of the minor that sold. Then that process begins on their end. The retailers in the City of Los Angeles pay a civil penalty for that. Once that civil penalty is paid for, we consider that an adjudication. Then the city's process, we begin our process. We are notified of that, and that's when we begin to, like Selena said, we send a letter of reprimand based on the sale of that tobacco products on that given date. And everything is within a 5-year period. I mean, we do have, you know, nearly 5,000 retailers in the city. We conduct 700 checks. Obviously, you know, there's always room to do more. And we would hope that the council will support that if there are any overages of fees, that we should always be trying to do a little bit more enforcement.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, move approval.
Second.
So moved. And actually, public comment, I apologize. We should do some public comment, because we do have some speaker cards. I'd like to call up Primo Castro from the American Cancer Society, and Mr. Robert Donin from the American Heart Association. You're next.
Morning, Chair. Morning, members of the Council and Committee. Primo Castro, Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. We are the lobbying arm of the American Cancer Society. One of the things that we want to let you first off is we are in support of everything that the City Attorney is doing here in the City of LA. I'd like to go ahead and applaud, members of the Council, several of you of this committee for taking actions, great actions in the past against, enforcement, against tobacco enforcement here in the City of LA. We want to make sure that we protect our youth more than anything. We're seeing, a lot of deceptive practices out there by a lot of businesses. We love businesses too. But however, one of the biggest things that we're seeing is that a lot of these deceptive practices are, in fact, they're not playing by the games, by the rules, and a lot of our youth are actually being hurt during the process. So here, ACS can hear in support of the report and all the recommendations by the City Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Donin?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Robert Donan. I'm actually representing the American Heart Association, where I've been a long-time volunteering grassroots advocate since 1988. It's a point of personal privilege to be here today, and I wanted to congratulate you, Mr. Chairman and members, on the creation of this new committee and, of course, the opportunity to testify in favor of this item. As somebody who has testified before and also followed the item from the beginning, I'd like to laud, applaud, and commend the city attorney and others for their efforts as far as this is going on. And again, it's a point of pleasure to be able to offer support for the American Heart on behalf of the American Heart Association as this moves forward. Thank you.
And Mr. Herman.
It's Herman.
I'm sorry?
Herman.
Herman.
Correct. Like Pee Wee Herman? Not like Englander Herman, but Pee Wee Herman.
Please go ahead.
Isn't it alarming that the deceptive idea of this council was all for business at one time, saying, let's have vapor cigarettes, let's have more licensings for pot shops, and then it became a disaster, a deceptive disaster by Mitch Englander and Joe Busciano, who's in law enforcement, to correct the problem right before it started, but rather you initiated it as enterprise of good business on the welfare of the public. And then you subject our children, us minors, or the minors in our community, to the deceptive idea that strengthening the penalties would result to correcting the problem. No. Go out and educate all the storefronts that sell tobacco, that it is against the law to sell to minors. How difficult is that? Don't be ignorant like Englander.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. So I believe Councilman O'Farrell moves and Buscaino seconds. So moved. We're good, right? Okay. I believe the Department of Public Health is here? Yeah. Great. So CLA, can we call item number 1, please?
Item number 1 is motion Labange Fuentes relative to requesting the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health to report in regard to the impacts of West Nile virus on the city, protection methods against the virus, and how to spread awareness to residents of the city.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Dr. Rachel Sivan. I'm a medical epidemiologist with acute communicable disease control. I wear the hat of the Director of Surveillance for vector-borne diseases within Los Angeles County. And I can report so far in Los Angeles County, 2015, it's been an extremely quiet year. We only have one case of a young man that we put a press release out. That was a youth that had West Nile associated meningitis that lived in Inglewood. Otherwise, we haven't had any cases with regard to even asymptomatic blood donors. This is the final 2014 West Nile virus epidemiology report. I handed that out, and it's posted on our website. And each week, as we get like more than one case, but we at least 3 cases, we update a report on an as needed to show the number of cases, the location within county, the severity of infection, the general age, gender distribution, as well as a small map you'll see on the lower right-hand corner that shows activity. This year, I brought you a map of what we're also working with our mosquito control agencies. We've always had a really close relationship, but there are 5 vector control agencies that are independent agencies. They are tax funded through property tax, but they are not entities of city or county health, but they are fantastic at what they do. And they do the mosquito abatement. They do surveillance of mosquitoes looking for West Nile virus positive pools, as well as other viruses that can cause serious infection. And they also, this map shows our 8 service planning areas, and we're now plotting them out on a weekly basis as we get their results. And we have a relation, these only show the 2 largest agencies, which is Greater Los Angeles, which spans the whole valley, most of Los Angeles, and San Gabriel Valley. And the other ones that get would be West, which is more the coastal region, and then Antelope Valley, Spa 1. So this is the current activity with the little bubbly things, the mosquito pools that have shown West Nile. And you can see the areas are where we usually get them, which is in the warm region, and then a few dead birds infected with West Nile, and our 1 human case in the Inglewood area. So we have a strong collaborative relationship where we share the human case data, and they are now sharing. They've always shared, but now we're going to really try to work with it to see if we can do any stronger predictions on where human cases are and early warning. But this year it's been a quiet year, and sometimes that's what it is with West Nile. You can see last year, the past 2 years, the last year represented in dark red was 2014. It was our second biggest cases, number of cases to date. Our biggest cases were our largest number of cases was actually in 2004 with about 310 cases. And then 214, we had 218. So as predicted, our biggest peak of cases are in the warmest months, which is often August and September. But who knows why it's quiet so far, whether it's drought conditions or just the birds play a really important part of the ecological, and the birds that remain have good immunity. So we have all kinds of systems to try to pick up cases as fast as we can to work with the districts. Like we have a part of our surveillance system, we have a relationship with the major clinical laboratories that provide us with positive West Nile blood tests, and from those we investigate further with the physician and the patient and track those down. So all I can say is this year it's extremely quiet. The mosquito, the vector control agencies are hard at work doing testing, surveillance, treatments as necessary, and providing their residents with information as far as where the West Nile virus positive mosquitoes have been found.
Thank you. So the handout you gave us was for 2014,
That's right. And because we only have 1 case so far, we wait until we have at least 3 cases to start this. We did because it would look kind of funny with just a dot on it. And we did do a press release, if you look on our website, with the first case.
You know, I know the county uses a SPA system. Is there any way you could possibly break out these numbers by city council district, which is 15?
If we have the boundaries, we have a map specialist, and if I would have the boundaries, I don't see why I think it's highly possible. Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be
Great.
It would be not a problem.
Yeah, Doctor, I've got a question for you. What is a Sentinel case for chickens?
The Sentinel chickens is
in
like
my district, I have a lot of equestrian and rural type of uses, and I'm just wondering if we're doing a good enough job of reporting animal death to understand if it's
animal deaths are reported. With the horses, since about 2004, there's been a highly effective horse vaccine to protect against West Nile. And because horses are such a big investment, people do get this horse vaccine. And we see very few cases. The horse cases are reported to veterinary public health, And we take a strong interest in them because they, again, serve as like a sentinel, as there are a lot of West Nile virus positive, but fortunately, most horses, we see extremely few cases now because of the investment of, and for most horses, it means death.
And chickens?
Severe case of encephalitis.
And what about chickens?
Chickens actually are used as, they usually suffer no consequence, but they're used at what we call as surveillance, like the canary in the coal mine. There's over 100 flocks in a variety of locations, and the vector control agencies try to pick the highest risks for where they think the mosquitoes, and they actually do blood tests on them every week looking at, they make sure they don't have any evidence of West Nile infection, and then they keep on going back and doing a simple spot blood test to see whether they've had antibodies. And these chickens continue, somehow it's a very mild infection. It really doesn't affect them. They continue to lay eggs and do everything like they're completely normal, but because it's proven, it's a very classic way that this surveillance has been done, actually prior to even mosquitoes, which the technology used there is a higher level with the PCR-based testing as opposed to a traditional serologic test.
Great, thank you.
Any other question?
Yeah.
No.
So, anytime if David Ornstein had contacted me, if I could get some clear boundaries, I'm sure we could get some detailed information on cases in the past or cases as we move forward.
Great, yeah, so, I'd like to move in, amend item number 1 to recommend that the City Council request from the LA County Department of Public Health a report of the impacts of the West Nile virus in each of the LA City Council districts. We'll get that boundaries for you. 2, also to current efforts to mitigate the transmission of the West Nile virus. And 3, the County Department of Public Health and the Greater Los Angeles Vector Control District identify habitats and ecosystems within the City of LA that foster the principal vectors of the West Nile virus. Do I have a second?
Second.
There's a public comment.
I apologize. You're right, Mr. Herman.
We didn't vote. We didn't vote yet.
Yeah, we didn't vote on it. So could I have public comment? Mr. Herman, I apologize.
It's only on.
In all public interests, I strongly believe that the CDC should give the final determination whether or not we are spreading this virus among the community and among our pets. So as brought out in this motion, it says here that there are more than 100 positive samples of the virus in mosquitoes and more than 250 positive dead birds. And the first documented human case within the past year, whether it's 1 or 2, our concern should be to address the issue on the transportation of this virus from animal to human and from human to everyone. That's the bottom line. So the West Nile virus has no cure, and at least within the last year, 100 people have been tested positive. So if you would go out and remove all the stagnant puddles from all the potholes that you can't fix on the sidewalk and streets, maybe you can eliminate the problem before it becomes a crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Thank you, Dr. Sivan.
One thing I would highly recommend, you will get a very thorough discussion if you bring in, I would say, Greater Los Angeles Vector Control to come and answer questions. They can detail you on their specific surveillance effort and how they do, because they are the people, we do the human case surveillance, we can do education, but they do the key issues which is like the eradication of mosquitoes, the trying to get rid of standing water and all those. So my recommendation would be to bring Greater Los Angeles Vector Control, one of their representatives who can really give you a very thorough discussion.
Well, CLA? City Clerk, do I have to reread the amendment? Do I have to reread my amendment, or? Do I have to reread my amendment, or?
I'm sorry.
He has to repeat his amendment, or he just submit it?
Go ahead and restate your recommendation.
So amend the request from the LA County Department of Public Health to report on the impacts of the West Nile virus based on the city council districts, current efforts to mitigate the transmission of the West Nile virus, and 3, the Department of Public Health and the Greater Los Angeles Vector Control identify habitats and ecosystems within the city of LA that foster the principal vectors of the West Nile virus. And I believe Councilmember Buscaino seconded.
Second.
So moved.
As amended.
As amended. Thank you. Thank you for that assist. And item number 4, CLA, can you read item number 4, please?
Item number 4 is motion Labange O'Farrell relative to instructing the Department of Recreation Parks to report on all current use agreements with Los Angeles Unified School District, Los Angeles Community College District, and Los Angeles County Office of Education, and on the process of establishing a citywide joint use committee for the purpose of developing programs for school parks in the city. And this matter was also referred to the Arts, Parks, and River Committee.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning, council members. My name is Linda Barth. I work for the Department of Recreation and Parks. I am one of the staff members that works quite a bit on joint use agreements. I'm one of the main liaisons with the Los Angeles Unified School District, which is the organization that we have about 30 joint use agreements with currently. And they are a mix of what I call our most successful joint use arrangements, which are for swimming pools. There are also a group of joint use agreements that are because of applications for Prop K funds on the part of the LA Unified School District to build recreational facilities. And so they have agreements with recreational parks to help provide public recreation at those facilities. And then there's another set of different kinds of relationships that we've developed with LAUSD over the years. Currently, we don't have any joint use agreements with the Community College District or with Los Angeles County Board of Education. They mostly funnel money for preschools and Head Starts on park property, but we don't have actual joint use agreements with them. So we have been in the process of developing a draft report which would address the various issues that are raised in the motion and talk a little bit about our relationships and both the challenges and successes. And I am happy to answer any specific questions and also to take notes so that we can make sure in our final report we cover all of the issues that are of crucial concern.
Okay. So when will the report be, do you anticipate the release?
We actually have a draft report, so we would be prepared, I think, depending on any questions that came up today. If we needed to expand or elaborate on our report, we could report back within 30 or 60 days as your preference.
Great. And, you know, in my district, well, actually, borderlines, actually might be your district, borderlines. I've recently learned about a community parks framework at the Vine Street Elementary. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, the concept of the community school parks was to take an elementary school in particular where the playground maybe was just all asphalt or there wasn't even a nice playground area, and to invest funds. It might be bond funds, it might be funds under the control of LAUSD, but to invest funds and upgrade the playground, add more green space, make it more pleasant for the children, but then to also have a relationship with a community group who would open that school or that portion of the school play yard to the public in afternoons, weekends, summertime, depending on, the exact situation. But the idea was to then make it a public playground. First improve it for both the students and the community. There is an organization, for example, People for Parks. They're not the only one. There are a couple other groups who wanted to step up and run the playgrounds. One of the challenges that exists is that LAUSD would like to have their own Beyond the Bell staff so that they have staff there that has the right keys, they can make sure that the restrooms are cleaned and so forth. And the reason, of course, is because the next day they have to have that school ready for students. So LAUSD's position has been, we want to make absolutely certain that that public use, we're happy with the public use, but we want to make sure that the next morning it's ready for school. So that has been a little bit of a challenge because that requires budgeted resources. Either the community organization has to raise funds in order to pay the Beyond the Bell staff, Or there has been also talk about money coming to the Department of Recreation and Parks to pay our staff, where other areas we have a joint use agreement where we've worked out that we make sure that we lock up properly and that we clean the restrooms or restock them. So it's been sort of a funding issue to make that model work perfectly. There was a plan to have one pilot community school park in each of the 15 council districts. I think 3 are completed, and I'm not sure what the status is as far as their operation. That's something that we can get the most current update and include in our report.
Great, if you could include that in the report, because it's my understanding that the Vine Street Elementary is open after 3 p.m. and on weekends, and schools are, especially in park-poor areas, it could be a tremendous asset. But I think we have some questions.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you're familiar with the Porter Ranch Joint Use Agreement, the Porter Ranch School.
I am not.
If you can pull that one. I worked on it for about 5 years. It's probably one of the most extensive joint use agreements we've got with LAUSD. It's in collaboration and contract and agreement with the Homeowner Association as a dedicated revenue stream for 20 years, 10 with an automatic renewable. The Neighborhood Council, which has oversight into the use of the school and weekends, evenings, after hours.
Wow.
Cleanup provisions, what's allowable, what's not, rules, regulations, you name it. It's not just the fields, it's also common space and as well the auditorium. So you can have inside use as well for meetings and other events. It's a framework that lays out how the community with both the HOA in concert with the Neighborhood Council and the CD12 office, the council office, works with the principal to map out and calendar every month or throughout the year access and availability, with LAUSD providing security and cleanup. So it's all mapped out for 20 years. It's incredibly comprehensive. It was one of the most detailed, in fact, the city had never done anything like this, either had LAUSD as a model to what we can do with, and you mentioned the dedicated revenue stream, it's all laid out.
Okay.
So it's a terrific example of collaboration and being able to use the joint use agreements for schools and communities. And we use it all the time. And there's never an issue. It's a great partnership. And so I'd encourage you to pull that. City attorney did a great job back then working with us on it as well. In fact, we met every single week for almost 5 years in laying out not just the plan, but also we were building a new school at the time. So we actually had the plan set, approved, voted on by the council and LAUSD and the HOA, as well as the Neighborhood Council before the school was even built. And now it's in operation, and it's been phenomenal.
Porter Ranch Collaborative, you said?
It's a Porter Ranch Community School.
Great, and we will we'll get that agreement and take a look at it, and also take a look at how it compares with some of our other ones and how it can be a model. We'll include that in the report.
Yeah, really interested. Members?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, Ms. Barth, I'm so delighted to see that you're the point person for joint use agreements
Thank you.
between Rec and Parks and LAUSD. With the work and experience you bring in, with your great work with animal services back in the day, now here you are. It's really great. I too have lots of experience with joint use agreements, and I'm a huge believer that our public educational facilities are our community centers. So I'm delighted to hear about the growing relationship with our College Board of Trustees so that our LACC campuses might also enter into the picture to have accessible playing fields for our neighborhoods. I'm a huge believer in that. So I encourage you to do whatever you can, and for us to do whatever we can to make that possible as well. In terms of, we have a lot of projects that are aging. Back in 2002, we opened the Washington Irving Middle School, which is in the 13th District there in Glassell Park, and it has 2 active recreation fields. One wasn't, but we amended and did a lot of work to make the one field active recreation as well. Now, the existing artificial turf field has been red tagged because of heavy use, and quite frankly, a lot of misuse by some of the adult leagues who actually wore cleats, and they basically ruined the artificial turf field, so it's red tagged. and we have to come up with a plan to replace that because it's sitting there and the community can't use it. What I wanted to bring up, just for sort of thinking ahead, is it was built on a base of asphalt, which I think is problematic. It's not good for the body. And then now that the astroturf is torn up, you're sitting there with asphalt that kids are still getting out without permission and playing on, and it's just not a good situation. So I'm just saying that as food for thought more than anything else in terms of moving forward, because I love artificial turf fields, but perhaps an asphalt pad below is not the way to go. Maybe we could work on more environmentally friendly improvements with our joint use agreements if we're going to be investing more funding for these. And then be thinking in terms of our aging facilities now, that we've built a lot of these facilities, but they're going to need to be repaired and or replaced. And where's that funding going to come from? My office is working with Rec and Parks right now to identify resources to replace that field because it's so widely used and so badly needed in that community. So I just wanted to put that out there. And lastly, in your experience, how is the relationship now, all these years later, now that we've been doing joint use agreements? Sometimes it's kind of an ad hoc approach depending on the school. There's some resistance and reluctance from time to time. It's not a one-size-fits-all because of that sometime resistance depending on the school where we're doing a project.
Correct.
And I've seen that firsthand myself. So I was just want to get some of your thoughts on that.
As you may be aware, LAUSD encourages principals to take a very powerful, strong ownership feeling over their schools. And that is often where we meet the resistance. There's been a joint use agreement that was negotiated because of a Prop K agreement, and then a new principal comes to the school. They're working with their students, their communities, their families. You know, they've got their priorities, what they're trying to do with sports. And then Recreation and Parks comes in and says, hey, we'd like to run a youth program in the afternoons, and that's where sometimes the principals are like, but I have a program, or I'm doing something else. What we found, in fact, what we've been doing the last year, is to try to have more meetings and more communications between us and our staff that actually program sports, and the principals and the school staff. And yes, sometimes there's well, we don't really want to do that. I actually had a principal say, don't even ask to use my fields. Just don't ask. But, you know, communication, I mean, you eventually reach some compromise because we're all out there just trying to make better communities and help the kids and help them be more healthy. So, you know, you just keep working with these organizations, you keep working with the staff, and you eventually reach a point where you're able to effectuate a good program. So that's part of it. I mean, probably the key thing is good, good communication. Sometimes the principals just aren't aware. And the more we get to know each other and build a relationship, the more it's better for that joint use agreement. So that's what we've learned.
And lastly, I think this is where the council offices can help because our deputies generally get to know the principals at the various schools.
Yes.
So don't hesitate to let us,
Definitely.
Involve us, and then we can also involve the actual school board members to keep encouraging. So it's relational. So.
Yes, that's true. And that has happened in CD15, for example, where the pool was opened this summer. I mean, that was a great example of working with the principal and doing something that worked for everybody.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, as well as the community college district as well. This is something that's very exciting and very interesting that my office is interested in as well.
Okay.
In the interest of time, you know, I was told that can we hold this in committee till the report comes back? Because I think we all want to probably hear this. And because you're working with LACO and LACCD as well as LAUSD, 60 days is.
That would be, yes, because I definitely want to spend some time talking to the community college district. We got a little bit of like, that's not going to work unless you pay big prices.
We can put you in touch with the
let's refresh a conversation with them.
Okay.
Yes.
And there is a public comment on this.
And there's a public comment on this.
And I would ask, pull that agreement if you need help with my office.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you. Absolutely.
Please use all of us as a resource.
Okay, will do.
Mr. Herman?
This definitely sounds like a double dipping into two different programs here, and it impacts the effects of what communities and what school districts or separate entities have involvement with. Now, I can see if both monies on both sides were collaborated for the budget and resources to keep up with the maintenance, acknowledge the facility when it's run down, and as brought out by many points among you, the concern for public safety. Until you address all public safety concerns at our parks, you should not allow any other entity outside of Parks and Recs to come in and utilize these locations until you bring them up to code under the American Disability Act, because the city has been under so many circumstances in non-compliance. Fix the bathrooms to compliance, fix the sidewalks and the pathways and the areas of parking so people don't get hurt in public areas of Parks and Recs.
Thank you, Mr. Herman.
Thank you.
Last item, number 3, if we could make it quick. Mr. CLA, can you read it?
Sure. Item number 3 is Department of Recreation Parks Report and Resolution relative to the California Department of Education 2015-16 Child Development Program's continued funding application for the General Child Care Program and the California State Preschool Program for subsidized preschool services at the Jim Gilliam Child Care Center.
I heard this is a non-controversial item. Does any of the members have any questions?
Move approval. Second.
Public comment.
Oh, there's public comment. There is a public comment, so you guys don't mind, unless you have something pressing you guys want to say about this item? No? Okay. Mr. Herman? I don't want the president of the council to be mad at me on my first chairing of my committee, so minute.
Well, moving forward here, I'm not going to collaborate with these two items, item 3 and item 4, because again, as I brought out, and as you heard regarding public safety, budget and resources and, the destroying of this property and to bring it back up to its condition puts people out. So again, stop double dipping in programs, stop creating something that's going to make the problem worse. Vote no for Englander for county supervisor, because as you may know,
if you could
this type of double dipping for departments of recs and parks is similar to using county parks, city parks. They all fall under the same districts. Get it through your big ears. Stop double dipping.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. I believe Councilman Buscaino moves.
Move the approval.
And Englander seconds. So moved. And we are at public comment.
We do have public comment, Mr. Herman.
Mr. Herman?
Mr. Herman, can you come up?
Public comment. we got
Are you
two.
accommodating me my 2 minutes?
I'm sorry. We got 2 minutes. We got a minute. If you don't mind.
Fucked up. You come all this way for a meeting, and it's fucked up to find out that you only have 1 minute to express and exchange ideas of speech. The result can become something of a removal, like you did with me in Van Nuys. So this is considered no way or right to communicate in open meetings. The idea to criticize bullshitters who act like politicians. If you really want us to have an expressive conduct with you, allow us at least 2 minutes. Getting up at 6 in the morning to be here at 9 o'clock is fucked up, so that I can't enjoy myself, to accommodate myself under 2 minutes if possible. Stop being tyrants. You're so unreasonable to accommodate the public, not just the disabled population, but the general public comment. Fuck you.
Seeing no other public comment, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.